Good morning, everyone. I think we've just got a couple of people just logging in. But whilst everybody's just logging in, I shall start the meeting. So, good morning and welcome to East Devon District Council's Housing Review Board meeting on Thursday, the 30th of January 2025. I am your chair, Councillor Sarah Chamberlain, and the meeting is being recorded and is live on the Council's YouTube channel. Can I remind everyone present to please use a microphone or your comments will not be recorded. Health and safety announcement. There is no fire alarm drill anticipated today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest exit by following the green running man signs above the doors. Please make your way to the rear of the car park and wait for the organiser of the meeting to tell you when it is safe to return. This is a smoke-free building. If you wish to smoke, there is a smoking shelter at the rear of the car park alongside the building. Toilets are available in the stairwell of the building at each floor landing, and water is available in reception. Finally, please make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. We will now do a roll call of committee members here present and declarations of interest. Can you please unmute your microphone when you hear your name, and please confirm by saying present and declare any interests that you may have. When you have confirmed you are present, please mute your microphone again. I will now hand over to Alethea to do a roll call and declarations, please. Present, only declaration employed by Exeter City Council.
Councillor Aurora Bailey, she's given her apologies. Councillor Jenny Brown.
Present. NRI for Honiton Town Councillor.
Councillor Chris Bearhop.
Present and no declaration, thank you.
Councillor Tim Dumper.
Present and non-registrable interest for Exmouth Town Council.
Councillor Melanie Martin.
Present.
Councillor Simon Smith.
Present but no declarations.
Sarah Clark.
Present, no declarations.
And Rob Robinson.
Tenant of East Devon Council. Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. And Rosie Dale.
Present and a sheltered housing tenant.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are correct.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Alethea. Agenda item 1, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 7th of November 2024, pages 3 to 10. Does anyone have a comment on the set of minutes from the 7th of November 2024? No comments from anybody? Everybody happy to vote to approve the minutes? Yeah? Yeah. Okay, I will sign the minutes. Today.
Yeah. Nearly there. Nearly made it through the year's longest month.
Thank you very much.
Ask a question on the minutes. Yes? Yep, thank you. So it said that there's going to be a staffing update and advised that a formal housing staff structure would be produced with a brief description of the housing roles. I see here that the staffing one is going to be a verbal report. Have we not got a physical sheet of who's who? I thought we were supposed to have that in January.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. There is an update of staffing coming out, isn't there? I'll hand you over to Catherine.
Yep, so there'll be another verbal update today, and then we can issue the updated version of the planogram, of the organogram after the meeting. No problem at all.
Thank you very much. Just checking, there's nothing else because I've signed them now. Last chance, okay? Excellent. Thank you. Yes, that's been spoken about. Yep, that's fine. Agenda item 2, apologies.
I've had apologies from Rachel Brown and Councillor Aurora Bailey.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest have already been done by roll call, so that's fine. Agenda item 4, public speaking. I don't believe we've got any speakers registered. No, lovely. Moving on to agenda item 5, matters of urgency. There are none. Agenda item 6, confidential exempt items. There are none. We are moving forward quickly. Look at this. Agenda item 7, forward plan, pages 11 to 12. I will pass you over to Catherine, Interim Director for Housing and Health, to present the plan.
Just for clarity, no longer interim chair, I'm afraid. We need to amend that in the notes. I'm stuck now, guys. I'm here. No rid of me now. Okay, so to just kind of talk through today's plan, just to draw everyone's attention to the fact that we had hoped to be bringing the individual garden maintenance scheme today. However, due to some of the delays at the beginning part of the year, and we needed to get the papers out, I'm afraid I was unwell and it delayed the paper coming forward. I am sorry, because it needed to go via ELT before we brought it to the forum. So that will now go forward to the next meeting. The work has been done on it, consultation has happened internally, and we are now in the position of moving forward and bringing our proposals here before we then take those out wider. So apologies for that. I will take personal responsibility for that being delayed. In terms of the next meeting, as we know, is going to be slightly kind of busier than today, I think it's fair to say, with some of the information coming forward around draft proposals for asset management strategy. We will be talking about home safeguard equipment and the rollout as to how we're delivering the new programme and giving you a full update on that in the next meeting. We will be giving progress on the objectives that we set out within the resident involvement strategy. There'll be an initial draft of the tenant strategy. And then, sorry, there's a duplication there. So home safeguard update, including the digitalisation, just to reiterate that will be included within the wider home safeguard piece. And then looking around digital capabilities for tenants. Again, that's a piece of work that's well underway, and we just want to bring that forward in the next meeting. We are hoping as well that before the next meeting that our colleagues that we've been working with from Savills will potentially be available to us to come to do a session, not too dissimilar to the session that we had with Curry and Brown previously, to give an update as to the work that is underway with them as well. So hopefully that'll give you an update and a full briefing as to where we are with the progress on those pieces of work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Questions? Sarah?
In the last meeting, it was said that the stock condition survey would be added to the forward plan, but I can't see it on there unless I'm misreading.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So yes, so that'll all be part of that kind of initial piece around the asset management strategy, pulling out the key points and the key data from the stock condition survey results.
Thank you. Outside committee, Councillor Barlow, did you want to say something?
Not on this occasion. I think the only thing I was going to point out is that in the meeting 4, the standing item finance report seems to be missing, but I'm sure as a standing item it will be included, even though the others are already in there. And also on the individual garden maintenance scheme, is that going to mean it's too late to implement this year? Because obviously gardening gets important starting in March, really. And I know from my residents in Sidmouth, they get, it's one of the things that just makes the building look horrible. And I can't get an answer out of anyone as to how much it costs so that we could try and find another way around it, because we're waiting for your report.
Yep, through you, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, just to sort of respond to that, Ian, I mean, if there are individual concerns, what we have said is where people are already signed up to the scheme, we will commit to doing work with them, and so that isn't a problem. But it is about the longevity of that and how we're able to sustain it, just because it's running, I think from previous conversations, it's running at a significant loss and significant cost. So where there are individual cases where people are already signed up, we will honour that until the new system is in place.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments from outside of committee? No? Any questions, comments from inside committee? Everybody happy? Excellent. This is just a note, this one, isn't it? Yeah. So note, excellent, thank you very much. So moving on to agenda item 8, this is a staffing update. This is a verbal staffing update to be received from Andy King, Assistant Director for Housing.
Thank you, Chair. A relatively short but no less important update today. So there are 2 points. Firstly, just to let the board know that we are now out to advert finally for our new corporate lead for property and assets role. This is a really pivotal role. Those of you remember Susie Williams, who was here before. This is a kind of reimagining of that role. We've had to go through a process of design and job evaluation, but that is now out to add, and we are hopeful that we will be making an appointment to that role by mid-March. And then I think Catherine had a second update on staffing.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Just to let everybody know, if you weren't already aware, that Amy Gilbert-Jeans, who was previously the Assistant Director for Regulated Services Housing, had been seconded across into a corporate performance lead role. Amy has left the organisation, and that has now meant that we were able to go through a recruitment process to her substantive post as Assistant Director for Regulated Services. And I just am very pleased to say that Andy King has been now permanently appointed into his existing current interim role, so now is official in that role. Just like extend congratulations. Thank you, everyone. Just to embarrass him there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, both. Do we have any questions or comments from outside of committee? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you. And it's a shame that we don't get a written report anymore. It's just, and I've been through personnel to try and work it out, but how many staff have moved positions now, and how's the sickness doing?
I will pass over to Tracy to explain how that is picked up for you.
Thank you, Chair. Ian, we also have a personnel committee, and at personnel committee we do talk through staffing, including sickness levels and approach. So I can refer you back to the minutes of the last personnel committee if you wanted further details. As far as the structure is concerned, I think Cat has committed to providing an up-to-date structure of the current housing service at the end of this meeting.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from outside of committee just before we come into committee? No? Okay, moving on into committee then. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you. Does the staffing update include all roles, even day-to-day housing officer roles, or are you just giving us the key roles?
So the staffing update is something we introduced just a couple of meetings ago, and it was just so that the board were aware of those key strategic roles within housing and knew what was going on. Of course, we often have lots of changes within the frontline teams, and so no, it doesn't include those. We've got recruitment going on for a couple of frontline roles at the moment.
Can I come back? I'd be really interested to know, it doesn't have to be too detailed, but how many officers, what the turnover is as well. I think that's quite important to the service that we're providing, how effective it is, if that's okay. I asked for this report, this update, and it's only today I noticed that you're giving us the more senior key roles, strategic roles. But I'd be interested to know about staffing across across the board, even if it's not detail?
I think that probably is what Trace was talking about earlier, that's covered at Personnel Committee in terms of staff turnover and number of recruitment that we're doing across not just housing, but the rest of the council. So it's quite heavy detail in terms of staff that, as I say, is covered by that Personnel Committee.
Could you give it to us in maybe in non-detail form then?
Yeah, that will be on the minutes from the personnel meeting where you can see those details. Councillor Barhop.
Thanks, Chair. I would actually support the inclusion in this report, or update, if you like, of housing-specific KPIs relating to personnel. I mean, we are an overview scrutiny type of committee here, so it's one of the 3 scrutinies. We need to be able to understand, and it has a ramification for our tenant members who are not necessarily privy or au fait with the machinations of the personnel committee, that you know, it gets included in this forum. So things like staff turnover for housing-related staff, and sickness and absence levels for housing-related staff has an implication for our customers in terms of our tenants. And I think it's something that we should be including in future. I recognise that at the moment it's not available right now. And secondly, if I could just say, I believe elsewhere in these reports there's a senior complaints officer role which is vacant at the moment, or was vacant, and that's held as an explanation as to why complaints are not necessarily being updated in the body of the report here. So can we just have an update on that, please? It's referenced in these, I think it's the Housing Performance Report Q3 later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barb. I will go over to Catherine, please.
Yeah, thank you. There's no reason why we can't replicate the high-level data. That's absolutely not a problem to bring it here. And as you say, it's a very good point around tenant members not being privy to that information. So yeah, we can absolutely do that and just drag it across and bring it into here. I guess I'm erring on the side of caution around how operational we get on some of those conversations. So I guess I put a plea out to members that we don't end up getting too far into the weeds really with it. But there's no reason why you can't see that information. Obviously, it's public and it's there anyway. We'll just bring it across. That's not a problem. In terms of the senior complaints role, Chris, I am gonna have to take that away if that's okay, and then have a little look at that, because I just need to clarify what role you're referring to, because we are at capacity, so I will just need to have a little look. Is that okay? Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dumper, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, just to say, as a member of the Personnel Committee, I would suggest that the level of detail that I seem to hear people asking for is not actually presented at Personnel Committee anyway. I think people are looking for individual roles here, and we don't get that at Personnel Committee. We just get it in terms of numbers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, please.
I think I saw last week there was 3 adverts for staff advertised on Facebook for the housing department, and was one of those the complaints one? I think there was 20-odd thousand for one, 40-odd thousand for another, and up to 60,000 for another. Were the salaries shown?
Through you, Chair. No, none of those was the complaints one. So, as I said, I need to take that away. The roles that you're referring to is a housing officer role, the assets manager role that we've obviously already talked about, and then off the top of my head, I'm afraid I can't remember the other. We've got over 100, pardon? No, that was the assets manager role. So we've got over 100 and something, 120 odd staff. I'm afraid I can't tell you off the top of my head where our vacancies lie and what adverts are out at any one time.
Just a follow-up. So are they part of the whole housing area? So you're not at full capacity then if you've got 3 job adverts out?
In our complaints section, we are at full capacity.
Thank you. Any more questions, comments? No? Then we will move on. That is to be noted, and thank you very much. Moving on then to agenda item 9, financial monitoring report, pages 13 to 28. This is to receive a presentation from Simon Davey, please.
I don't like that, Ian. Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, what you've got in front of you is the revenue capital budget for 25-6, but also in the report an update of the current year in terms of where we are with the finance. Just to remind you of process, the overall budget, which includes the housing revenue account, goes to Cabinet. That's been adopted, comes out to the various committees for consideration, and then recommendations back to Cabinet, who meet next week to finalise their recommendation to Council. So that'll be on the overall budgets, council tax and rent setting. If we look at the report itself, you've got a lot of detail. What a difference a year makes, I think, in terms of what we presented this time last year was a rollover budget, I think, to be fair. What you've got now is a lot of detail. We've gone into a lot of explanation in terms of the different areas of the housing revenue account. So I won't go into all of that, but there is a lot there to read through. Helps those perhaps for the first time looking at what is the housing revenue account, what is the expenditure income relating to our council house properties, and there are appendix there with frequently asked questions as well. So what this budget for 25-6 looks at is comparing it against the revised budget for 24-25. So if you remember, we brought back to you in year a new budget for the current year, 24-25. And then we've moved on now to 25-26, and we're comparing against the two when we make those variation analysis, if you like. So in 1.3 of the report starts to get into the detail. That's the revenue budget. So that's your day-to-day expenditure on council housing in terms of the council's landlord function. So the big area there is income, first area we look at. So we're projecting the estimates of 21.7 million in rent income for next year, based on the government guideline in terms of the rent increase of CPI plus 1%, so 2.7% is the formula in terms of what we can apply for our rents next year, which brings us in that 21.7 million. If you remember, the housing revenue account needs to balance itself off. So that's the key part. That's the income available to you, and then all the expenditure needs to be within that total income remit, if you like. It needs to be a balanced budget. There are other areas of income that we get in through garages, through other areas as well, and those rates have been increased in line with inflation. In terms of the expenditure side, there's again sort of emphasised that a lot of detail that's gone into this. And I think in terms of reflection of the detail, the work, it's a big thank you to the housing team who have built into this, but also to Rob Ward, who sat over there from the finance team as well. And I'm hoping if there's any difficult questions, he will jump in and save me. So if we look at the repairs and maintenance, the big budget there is around just over 7 million. And that's for general repairs and maintenance. So that's revenue day-to-day costs. So that's outside the capital programme. These are generally sort of repairs that happen on a daily basis. So just over 7 million, and that's an increase of 50,000 over the current budget. Then you move into supervision and management, and that really accounts for the staff that work within the teams, but also not just those staff that work directly within housing, but also all those other functions that are needed, such as IT, accountants, legal, etc. So all of those sit under the costs of supervision and management, and there you have a budget of 9.1 million, which is a decrease on the current budget by 290,000. The main makeup of that is a reduction of 120,000 in employee costs and nearly 200,000 in those support service charges. So those are the charges I talked about in terms of your other areas that support housing, like IT, legal, finance, etc. So we've got a reduction in those costs, having done a review in that area. And also we got a reduction in employee costs. So if you remember when we set the current year budget 4.5, we needed to make some savings to help pay for the cost of capital in terms of the investment in our stock. Some of those savings in that sustainability plan that you probably had discussed at this committee are coming through now in terms of reduction in certain areas of costs that are helping us fund direct improvements in the housing stock. The next area is capital charges. So that's whereby we have to make a charge for the depreciation of housing stock, and that's an annual calculation. And in there we've allowed 2 million for that, which seems to be in line with where we are in the current year and previous years. A biggest change is in financing. So this is where we've invested in capital in our housing stock. In order to afford that, we've had to go and borrow money. That's planned out for future years, but that does have an implication on your individual revenue costs on an annual basis. So because of those previous borrowings, we're having to increase our annual contribution by nearly £500,000 in terms of debt repayment. So that's shown as 1.9 in your report on page 17. There's a little bit of income coming in on interest earned for the housing revenue account, 240,000. But then the key part under the section movement in reserves, this is showing you at the moment, we're presenting to you for the housing revenue account a balanced budget. So that income from tenants' rents is balanced off with in terms of the expenditure that we need to make in year. And you're actually making a contribution back into reserves of 250,000. So that's what we said we would do in terms of the current year. We've used our reserves quite significantly, but we said we'd have a plan going forwards where we'd build back up that housing revenue account balance. And what the draft budget presented to you shows that 250 going back in. There is one slight hiccup in that, just to sort of highlight to you. Since we wrote this report, this came out before the local government finance settlement, so that's numbers from government about various aspects of funding for local authorities. Most of that doesn't affect the housing revenue account because the housing revenue account is ring-fenced, sits by itself, is funded by its rents. However, there is one element of the settlement that does affect the housing revenue account, and that was the principle that with the increase in national insurance, local authorities would be reimbursed by the cost. We only know the methodology that's being applied to that, and at the moment that's showing that we'll only get back about a third of our costs. We won't know until the final settlement, which we expect in the next few weeks, what the final numbers are, but lots of authorities are reporting the same that we're reporting, looking at that formula, looking at the methodology, doing the calculations. It doesn't look like we'll get back the full cost of that increase in national insurance. For the housing revenue account, that's a cost of 64,000. We won't know the full cost, whether we will get the full reimbursement until the final settlement. So I'm just flagging up that risk that out of that 250,000 that we're saying we're going to put back into balances, we may need to use 64,000 at this point in time to balance off the budget, and then we'll look during the year how we might recoup that. So that's the only sort of change in terms of what's in the report. On page 18 of the report, under table of movements, you've got quite a useful table there comparing the revised 24-25 budget against the 25-26, looking at your income, looking at expenditure, and giving you the highlights in terms of the difference. And if you look at that table, the big difference, and I think this shows where we have got to now, in terms of 24-25, we brought to you a revised budget that needed 1.3 million to fund. Now we're producing a balanced budget for 25-26, but also to highlight in the rest of the report the significant investment that's going into the housing stock, but I'll come on to that in a sec, just running through the sort of order of the report. In 1.12, there's some details there about our future financial pressures. So we're no different to lots of local authorities who still have their own housing stock. We're seeing pressures around inflation, pressures around expectations over net zero, all sorts of things in terms of regulations, in terms of the standards for our council houses. So you've got lots of cost pressures coming in, but unfortunately, or fortunately, depending where you sit, if you're a tenant or not, but we're capped on the amount of increases we can put on our rents. So you're capped on that rental income, but you've got all those pressures in terms of expenditure, which is why we need the financial sustainability model that sits behind this about how we balance our books. Then the report goes on and talks about the longer term financial plan, lots of work that housing are doing in that area regarding various, working with Savills, we've worked with SIPFA, in terms of how we produce a 30-year sustainable plan for the housing revenue account. But in terms of what's in this report and budget over future capital expenditure, we factored that in at this stage. So then moving on to the capital, I won't go into too much detail, but you can see under 1.14 the areas that have been addressed in terms of putting that programme together, the category 1 and 2 hazards, tackling damp and mould, and a whole host of pressures that have come on in terms of what we needed to reflect in that capital programme. 1.15 on page 21 gives you quite a detailed list of what's included in the capital programme for next year, and that comes to a substantial sum of 18.3, 18.4 million, of which, if you look at the funding of that, we can offset roughly about 3 million from from right to buy receipts, from the contributions from the revenue account, but it leaves a balance of 15 million that we're going out to borrow to fund those improvements and necessities in terms of the stock. That has been factored into future plans and will factor into the 30-year plan as well. So that's a quick canter through next year's budget. Lots of detail, happy to take questions. The rest of the report looks at the current year up to December 24, and the highlights there are we are basically on budget to that was approved by this committee and council in year. So you can run through that. It's got the variances of income and expenditure, but the overall message on that is we're on track. So thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Just to confirm for those on watching on the YouTube, I'd like to thank Councillor Westerman for her update there on the financial paper. But actually, that was Simon Davey for those watching online. Just to confirm that. Anyway, moving on. So, outside committee, I have first on the list, Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you confirming, Simon, that we are going to borrow £15 million to finance repairs. My calculations say we have 21 million that we have ring fenced, that is our rent coming in, plus 15 million on top of that, plus 18 million on top of that for the capital, is that right? So that we're a total spend of 40 million pound, which is around about £10,000 a property. I just wonder, is this good value? And how do we know what value we get out of this? I know we trust our officers to make sure we're doing this, but it seems a huge amount of money. That 15 million, if my calculations, again, I'm not an expert, a calculation, it's another £700,000 of interest we will have to find every year that comes out of the 21 million, which gives us less money next year. So does that mean we're going to have to borrow even more money the following year? I'm just concerned that we go to this meeting 4 times a year and we get these figures. Last year it was, I think, 8 million that we were borrowing for 24-25, and we were concerned about that. Now we're borrowing 15 million and it's just a little line that's going into it. You know, is this sustainable? Can we keep doing this? Also, we've got... sorry, I'm just looking here at my notes because I'm only allowed to come back once, I remember. So it says that the supervision and management significant savings have been seen in regards to vacant permanent posts, with partially offset by an increase in agency costs, which are higher than anticipated insurance premiums. Yeah, are the agency costs going to be carrying on, or is that another saving that we can have? Are we bringing these posts in-house? And also, I see the £4 million that we were borrowing from an internal source we're not allowed to do anymore. So I presume that affects our financial position going forward and makes it, again, slightly worse. So how much money are we going to be having to, how much money will we have total borrowings by the time we add that 15 million in? I was trying to work it out, but it's not quite clear. I think it's something in the region of now 105 million, is that right, going to be? But again, be interested to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow. I will just allow Simon a couple of minutes to make sure he's got all that noted.
Thank you, Chair. So there were a number of questions there. The first question about do we need to spend the 80 million? Is it value for money, etc.? I think if you go through the report, as I'm sure you have, and the build up to what is required in terms of the cost for our housing stock, you've got compliance costs, disrepair costs, major repairs costs. So all of those have been built up in terms of a programme of works required to make those necessary improvements to our housing stock. That is a necessity for this council in terms of being a landlord, having a landlord function. I'm sure my colleagues will come in and perhaps add more detail to that, but there's been quite careful consideration and thought as to the programme of works needed over the next year in terms of what's required. That's the price tag attached to that. From a finance point of view, I'd love it to be a lot lower than that, but that is the price that's required to be spent. So the financing of that has been factored in to our current budgets, but you're right, there is a significant increase in the borrowing elements, and that's what's reflected in the report about what we have to put together in the 30-year plan, that affordability in terms of going forwards. But there is a significant amount of work here that's required urgently. So we'll just have to factor those borrowings into future years. But in the current state, we are affordable in terms of what we can afford for those debt charges that hit the housing revenue account. But as we put together from that stock condition survey, what works are required going forward, we'll have to do that serious calculation you're inferring in terms of about affordability of the existing stock against the future revenue implications of that borrowing. But at this current stage, you are produced a balanced budget. In terms of agency and reductions in costs, so we've budgeted for a full establishment. Where we know we've got agencies in post, we've allowed for that for the current budget, but in terms of going forward, the assumption is that they will be staff sat within the establishment within the budget. So there are, as you say, overall at the moment there are reductions because we've got some vacant posts. We've budgeted for a full establishment. Agencies are required. That will take up some of those savings. But in terms of next year's budget, it's a full establishment, and the assumption is staff will be in those posts. Desperately trying to, I'll look to Rob, who might know our current debt totals projected.
A couple of points. So we're roughly about 86.5 million in terms of debt at the moment. In terms of new borrowing, the 15.1 for 24-25 isn't correct. Essentially, it should be around 9 million, but we're very much likely, if you look at the outturns, to come in lower than that. So we're probably looking at about 8 million for 24-25. So that will take us up to kind of like 95. Mainly, the main reason for that is the right to buy being 100% funded through right to buy receipts. Additionally, on the 4.4 million that you mentioned about internal borrowing, it's not internal borrowing. Essentially, what it was it was thought to be a voluntary revenue provision that was put into the capital adjustment account. It wasn't a voluntary revenue provision. That was got wrong by SIPFA and our HRA specialist at the time, who was here to consult and do some work. Essentially, that was basically paying down debt. So there is no internal borrowing. It's just a reduction in our debt burden at that time. that was paid over about 4 years, which is included in the Q&A section.
You can come back once.
Thank you, Chair. So we're not borrowing 15.1 million is what you're saying, even though the report says we need another 15.1 million, we're going to have to go out to borrow. The impact of the above capital programme will add an additional 15.15 billion borrowing, or is that on top of the 95 billion?
That's 25, 26, not 24, 25.
Right, so we're at...
You all need to ensure that your microphones are turned off so this is all heard by everybody.
Am I allowed to come back again, though, or should I carry on my comeback now?
I would carry it on now so that officers can note it down and
Right,
then you can be
okay.
answered in one go.
The final thing then was the reduction in back office costs that you've found. I presume that our back office costs are a parcel, so £100,000 for instance, that we then divide around different parts of the council. And if we've not divided it because we've saved it in the housing, that I presume it has to be passed on to other parts of the council because our costs are still the same.
Okay. So if I come back just for clarity, and I think Rob did clarify, but when he was talking about we may not need to borrow the full allocation, he was talking about for 24-25, which is therefore reducing our projections going forward. But the 25-26, the 15 million is as we expect at the moment as the budget's set. So that's what we're expecting to borrow for next year. That may vary as capital programmes change, but that's what's in your budget and what's being set. In terms of your question around savings, you're right in full, but part is true savings in terms of there will be reductions in costs that we've managed to achieve through the council that has resulted in a reduction in the housing revenue account, but also in part there has been a reflection of what services are providing, make sure we've got that allocation right. So what's come out of the HRA has fallen within the general fund, as you suggest.
Thank you very much, Simon. Over to Catherine, please.
I just want to take this opportunity really to reiterate Simon's initial point when he started to present this paper. And when we talk about savings made in year, this is about efficiencies, it's about really effective working within the team. The team have worked incredibly hard to try and bring financial spend back in line. And I just want to, I guess, publicly acknowledge that and reiterate Simon's points and give thanks to the team members who've worked so incredibly hard to bring that in line. So yes, there have been savings made and a lot of that has been down to individual staff members working incredibly hard. So I just wanted to just acknowledge that, Chair, and take the opportunity, if I may. Thank you for obliging.
No worries at all. Okay, next on the list I have Councillor Faithfull, please.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. One, how much have we lost through right to buy? How does that impact us over a number of years, I would think? Probably, I don't know if you can give any sort of figures. And also, along those lines, how much are we selling off the good stock and left with all the problems?
I'm guessing, I looked at Rob quickly, but I'm guessing that I certainly haven't got those numbers off the top of my head, and neither has Rob. So we can provide that to committee very easily in terms of we have to do quarterly returns to the government on right to buys. So we've got that statistics if members require that. So we can give that to you direct unless the committee want it as a whole. In terms of those that are bought, it's circumstance, isn't it? It's the right to buys, we have no control over which ones we choose people right to buy, which ones we don't. So it'll be a spread across our stock.
Well, I mean, you can't see what's going to happen in the future, but you must be able to get an idea of what's happened in the past, maybe in the last 5 years or something like that, so we can get some idea what's generally happening. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah, I can provide that data direct to the councillor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Faithful and Simon. I think it would be worth just thinking about it if we have those details produced in the next committee under the finance report so people can hear it, because I'm sure, the data return, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much. Next I have Councillor Gazzard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I first declare in effect an NRI as a council tenant, please? Simon, thank you for your in-depth report. Very interesting and easy to read. My question is to do with the stock control, which is going to be in the budget in 25-26. The amount of money that we're going to borrow for the stock control repairs, is that actual figures correct? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, have you seen the report, so you know how much you want to borrow, or is that just an estimate and then we're going to have to borrow some more afterwards, because it's going to take more than 1 year to put all the repairs right? Thank you.
Through the chair.
Simon, yeah.
If I've understood, and come back if I haven't understood this correctly, this is a 1 year capital programme in terms of next year's budget that we've put together. The team have worked extremely hard in mapping that out and future requirements. So no, there will be many capital programmes coming forward, but I think that the bit that this committee would be interested in to see how that looks going forward is the business plan. When that comes back to you, that will then map out exactly what's required every year and how we're going to fund that out of our housing revenue account. I think that's the piece you're probably looking for, Councillor.
Thank you. Councillor Collins, please.
Thank you. In Appendix 2, you say there's a piece here saying the budget for garage income has increased significantly. Why is this, considering the garage stock isn't in a good state of repair? Well, I can tell you why. I mean, I'm a farmer. I've got lots of buildings on the farm, old stone buildings, modern buildings, and I get asked frequently, can you rent me a space? This will probably be a self-employed small builder that does repairs and decorating. They need somewhere small to store their materials. They don't want a big warehouse. These garages would be ideal. And if they're in the building line, maybe you could let them have these garages as part of them repairing them in lieu of rent. You're missing a trick here, because I'm sure there'd be a lot more income to be gathered in from the use of these garages. There should have been a report, I think reported to scrutiny last October. Well, I haven't seen this report. Has it been done? Thank you.
Thank you. I shall allow Catherine to answer that.
Yep, just to reiterate, really, there is a significant level of investment needed in all garage sites, would be my kind of broad brush statement. And that, as with all of our other assets, will all be included in the asset management programme and the plan for how we manage that moving forward. So all points taken on board, absolutely, but we cannot rent them out in the current state, and we could not do that with all good grace, really, and good intention, really.
Thank you very much. I have no more speakers listed for outside of committee. So moving into committee, do we have any? Councillor Burholt then first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, just like to congratulate the Finance and Housing team on pulling together a balanced budget, including contribution to replenish reserves as promised, especially from the position we were in, where you bear that in mind, maybe only six or so months ago. I mean, it's a phenomenal task, and recognise Catherine's already referenced the amount of work that must have gone into this, so I can only imagine it, really. In terms of Simon's point about not recovering 100% of the national insurance increase, that's an unsurprising but undesirable consequence of this government, unfortunately. Is there any plan I would put to the senior team, if you like, the senior management team, to lobby both the LGA and government, the local government minister, sort of urgently to try and get this rectified, because that's significant sums, and if you replicate it across 500 local authorities across the country, plus doubtless it will have the same impact on hospitals and health services and all the rest of it, it could be catastrophic, really. In terms of the capital expenditure, these are eye-watering sums of money, public money. Owning housing is expensive. £18 million capital expenditure is a lot of money, but it equates to £4,250 per house. And actually, for those of us who are privileged enough to own our own houses, we can recognise that £4,250 on upkeep, particularly when it's been let go for a period of time, isn't a great deal of money. I mean, we are sort of trying to rebuild on a legacy of poor condition that's been allowed to deteriorate over many, many years. So it is understandable that we are talking about these sums of money. That said, I think in terms of this committee's responsibilities, what could be helpful, and I know this again lays a further onus on the reporting of the numbers on a quarterly basis, but what we're asked to look at here is expenditure on the likes of kitchens, windows, bathrooms. In terms of value for money, it will be useful to identify how many are intended to be included in that spend and how many, as we go on quarter by quarter, we've actually achieved for that spend, so that we're ensuring, if you like, from the public's perspective and tenants' perspective, that we're getting value for money. So that would be a key performance indicator. For some specifics on here under major repairs that we could identify and monitor going forward, I'd ask for, please. Lastly, if we go back to the debt situation, 86.5 million pounds current debt, £9 million we're borrowing again this year, £15 million in the budget for 25-26, comes to a total, by my little brain, of £110 million. That's an awful lot of money. The debt burden, so the interest burden on that equates to about £5 million in interest alone by the time we get to March 2026. That's out of revenue of £22 million. If we don't repay any of that debt burden simply increases year on year, and it will increase at a rate that exceeds inflation at these rates. So we can't put our rents up quickly enough to cover our interest burden going forward. Now, I'm not saying that because I expect an answer to it. I'm saying that because I want to lay some expectations here, because there's some very difficult decisions to be made. If you're doing this privately, you'd be saying, actually, I need to recover enough in my rent in order to repay some capital expenditure and repay some debt so that I can borrow more in the future for more repairs. But if we're borrowing £15 million a year and we've got the stock condition survey to consider, that's going to get very onerous very quickly. And at that, Chair, I will be quiet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burhop. I'll hand you over to Simon Davey, first of all, please.
Thank you, yeah, and I'm sure Katrin will want to come in as well. So in terms of lobbying, definitely. So it was a provisional settlement, so there is a consultation period that ended. We've gone back specifically from East Devon's view, but also Local Government Association, District Councils Network, County, all the various groups have gone back with the same message, as well as other factors that were in the settlement over the national insurance shortage, the methodology. can't disagree with any of your other statements, and I think they are issues that are being recognised not just by us but other local authorities nationally in terms of the position local authorities are in with that sort of cap on rents, but the cost side associated with that. And I think there has been a lot of lobbying on that basis to government about the affordability of housing revenue accounts going forward, but I'm sure Kat will want to add to that.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to add, really, I mean, as part of the work that Southwark Council are leading on lobbying, you know, 2/3 of local authorities have said that they fear collapse, you know, as a result of the need to increase demand, increased regulatory standards, and an inability to increase rents at the same rates, whilst also having the challenging financial situation that our partners in housing associations and RSLs do not face in the same way as local authorities. So, you know, something will need to be done at some point, because otherwise, you know, collectively across the UK, we're not the only authority to suffer with this. We are absolutely not. And in fact, it sounds like we're actually in a better place than a number of other authorities. So I do hope that as part of the current work underway wider on a more strategic level in terms of devolution, that some of this financial option for the housing revenue accounts, not just for us, but for everybody, will need to be looked at to reduce that overall debt and to look at that borrowing and lending situation, because otherwise, personal opinion, not EDDC opinion, personal opinion would be that, you know, it's set to implode really if nothing is done. So absolutely don't disagree with a single thing you've said, Chris. It's absolutely accurate. And I guess, as you say, just to reiterate, those difficult decisions, you know, they're already underway. Those difficult decisions were already taking place just putting this together, never mind the discussion around what a 30-year business plan looks like in order to ensure that our homes are homes that people are safe and want to live in, which is always at the foremost of our mind, is actually, you know, how people are living in our homes right now. So don't disagree with you at all.
Thank you very much. Next I have Councillor Jenny Brown, please.
Thank you. First of all, health and safety, I think we ought to have some sort of stoppage to stop these wheels coming over the edge. They're pretty close.
Yeah.
So, so I also would be interested on the kitchens and bathrooms that were planned towards the end of last year that were halted, that were planned works that didn't go ahead, as Councillor Pope said. And also following on from Councillor Collins, you've got 2.5 million, etc. for voids. I'm not sure what sort of quantity of voids you expect to get during a year, but I know you've done really well getting it down to the numbers they are. But the ones left are actually in pretty bad condition. Could they not be moved across and take people off the self-build list so they actually buy them to renovate themselves? Then that money you then can buy new properties that can be bought in that don't, because I'm not sure how many, but that 2.5 is an awful lot of money for the small amount it's probably covering.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I'm so sorry. I've just literally had a mental block from your first comment. Your first comment was around
the bathrooms, kitchens that were planned.
Yeah,
October
sorry.
time.
I'm so sorry. Do you know that was really bad? It literally
Sorry,
left
don't worry.
me. Yeah, there's no reason why we can't bring that data here. It's data that we hold, so we can bring that information, as Councillor Burhop also said, you know, so we can bring that here. That's not a problem at all. In terms of the voids, I think when it comes to looking at disposing of any properties, as we've talked about previously when we looked at the disposals kind of approach, we do have to think about where those properties may end up, and they may end up in the wrong hands. And if we know that that property is of disrepair and is not in what we would consider to be habitable, then actually the risk is that if we pass that over, a kind of disreputable landlord could take hold of that and then put people in it. Do you know what I mean? So we've got to be really careful about what we're doing with our social housing and how we're handing it over. So I do think that just needs to be built into that bigger picture, really, about our disposals and what we're disposing of and how we dispose of it. So I think that's just a bigger piece, really, I think, to think about bringing back.
Yeah, so the self-build list, I know you've got one. You'd put one of the conditions on, the local person's condition. so it actually stays local and it's built by a local person, because you've got builders on your self-built list, obviously. Just seems a way forward to get money in and without having to keep doing up these really bad voids.
Yep, we can take that away and consider that as part of that piece. Yep, not a problem.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions from inside committee? Councillor Bellhop.
Sorry, one point that is a very minor point, but it mentions throughout this report on CO2 detection. Now, I suspect that should be CO detection, as in carbon monoxide, not carbon dioxide. But anyway, that's just a very pedantic point. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bellhop. I'm sure that will be noted and changed.
That's noted, and I won't point any fingers as to how that could have happened. I'll take it as director. Yes, Chris, we'll do that.
Thank you very much, everybody. So no more questions or comments. So we have recommendations. So I will go over to Giles for recommendations, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is that the draft revenue and capital estimates are approved and recommended back to Cabinet to finalise, and that the financial monitoring element of the report is as presented is noted.
Do we need a proposer and a seconder?
Proposer and a seconder, or you can propose through the Chair.
Councillor Bellhop has proposed.
Sorry, Chair, could I just add in, if that is the recommendation, the caveat regarding the monitoring of the numbers of capital elements such as kitchens, bathrooms, etc. I would like to have that added into that proposal so that it incorporates. It's kind of caveated that this is agreed, subject to us being able to monitor carefully how many of these types of capital expenditure are actually undertaken.
Can you actually give some wording, please, Councillor Burrow?
I'm really bad at that.
It's your proposal, recommend.
Yeah, all right, it's bounced back to me. Wish I'd thought this through. Okay, just give us a second. So I would suggest that it's so the recommendation stands subject to suitable key performance indicators being introduced to monitor major repair expenditure. I'm not sure I can.
Officers agreed.
Alethea, did you write that down?
I think you said something along the lines of subject to suitable KPIs being introduced to monitor, that you want major or all?
Major repair expenditure.
Major repair expenditure. There you go.
Is the seconder Sarah Clark? Are you happy with that amendment as well? Yes. So we have a proposer, a seconder to the amendment, and the original recommendation. Do you want to read the whole lot together?
That needs to be approved first, and then it can add it to the full recommendation.
So
we need a vote on that. We've got a seconder, but we need to vote because the committee might vote for that addition.
Yes.
Might first of all vote that down.
Does the committee understand the full amendment and what the recommendation is now? Is everybody happy? Yeah. Excellent, that's fine. So is everybody happy to vote for that together?
I'm sorry, I don't fully understand it, and what I don't, I'm going to come the pedant on the proposer now. what I don't understand is whether we are talking strictly in finance terms or strictly in numbers, which was when this whole subject was brought in. And I wondered whether that might clarify it for you when you come to actually doing the work on this.
I think there are going to be a number of difficulties, and I think we're going to have to navigate our way through it if that is something that is voted upon, just because numbers don't necessarily always tell the full story. And obviously we've got to consider that there are additional overheads and charges and things like that that are all taken into account. Does that make sense? Similarly, works will fluctuate through the year. We will also need to allow for, I mean, just in discussions yesterday, we were talking about allowing an 80-20%, you know, kind of hold back, I guess, on some of those major works, just in case works crop up through the year that we find out about, to allow you flexibility within the year to plan, because you can only plan so much. And I guess that's the problem, is that what we're trying to do, and I think we've talked about this previously, since joining, it's been really clear that we've been in a very reactive, responsive state, and that is reflective within our budget. That's been reflected in spend. What we're trying to do now is turn the tanker so that we become much more planned. We're currently in this little merging land, really, where we're going from a very reactive state to coming to a much more planned and considered state. And I just wonder what it's going to give us. It'll give information, but I'm not sure how much it will inform. It may give assurance that work is underway, but we can give that in other ways. So I guess it would just be, for me, my only hesitation is, it's not about not wanting to share the information at all, but it is about how meaningful that information is actually going to be. But I'm happy for us to feel our way through it and just try it. Or it is that we just present that information, so rather than it needing to be a recommendation, it is just presented within the information that we provide in terms of the KPIs and the data we provide. You know, maybe if that's a more meaningful way of doing it, I don't know. It's up to you.
Okay, just want to come back to Councillor Burholt, because this...
So just to clarify, the reason for this, or this suggestion, is if we look at the chart on 1.15, for instance, so it's specific to major repairs. It's where we've got a fair chunk, about half of the entire capital expenditure planned. Now, when we've put this budget together, it will be based on an estimate of numbers of capital jobs that we're going to try to undertake. So as a budget, what I'm asking for is those numbers get included, and you know, the numbers that went to populate, if you like, £1.3 million being spent on replacement kitchens. If that's for one kitchen, that's not good value for money. If that's for 100 kitchens, that's very good value for money. So the truth is somewhere in between, and it's really that as a starting point, and then as we go through the year, we can monitor, well, what are our assumptions? And actually what we'll do is we'll learn collectively, as a group, as finance, etc., how much should I be budgeting for kitchens in the subsequent years, because I did 50 this year and they cost me £5,000 each, or whatever it may be. It's
Okay.
that principle.
Sorry, Chris, I just cut you off then. I'm so sorry. So through the chair, we are stuck to a schedule of rates for all of our major works. So again, we can provide that information. That's not, you know, we can absolutely make that clear. That is part of the kind of the figures that we get per kitchen, depending on the size of property. So for example, for a 1-bed, 2-bed, 3-bed property, you get different, you know, scales of kitchen size, which comes at different costs, but they're all clearly laid out. And then, yeah, we can then put that, you know, there's no reason, I don't think, I mean, I'm looking for my colleagues to nod at me, but there's no reason why we couldn't provide that as part of the financial plan and the update, really, to just make sure, and we obviously need to consider whether or not that needs to be a Part B.
If I may, Chair, ultimately we are custodians of this money, and our recommendation is to Cabinet to go ahead and spend this. Okay, so you know, we have a responsibility to ensure it's being, you know, responsibly spent, and in my opinion, those sorts of KPIs would be an assistance in us monitoring that. Okay.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, not a problem at all. Honestly, I don't disagree.
just check. Rob, did you want to come in? No, that's okay. Just checking. So, are you happy, Councillor Dumper, now with the recommendation that's now been put forward?
Yes, and I think see how it works in practice and that sort of thing, really, I think.
Excellent. So if everybody's happy now and they with it going forward, yeah, and understands what it is, you with the amendment, yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Thank you, Giles.
Okay. I'll have a go. That the draft revenue and capital estimates are approved and recommended back to Cabinet to finalise, and financial monitoring elements presented is noted, with the recommendation that suitable KPIs are given to the HRB to demonstrate major repair expenditure, or we could be here all day just getting the wording right, and we'll finalise it with Alethea.
Right, everybody happy with that? Now, everybody happy to vote on that? So, if you're all in approval with it? Yep. Did you get that, Alethea? Lovely.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I didn't see your hand go up, sorry.
That's fine. Thank you. Okay, so moving on. Well done, everyone. Moving on to agenda item 10, which is electrical compliance audit, pages 29 to 32. Back to Simon Davey to present the report, please.
Do you know what, Chair? I forgot all about this. I came along to the budget and I forgot this was on your agenda. Bear with me. Thank you. So, SWAP carried out, SWAP are our internal auditors, Southwest Audit Partnership. They, as part of their programme of works in terms of looking across the council, they had down for housing electrical safety in terms of areas to carry out their normal audits on. Says he, quickly reading and remembering what's in the report. So they undertook their normal tests and basically came across, made a number of recommendations. It had a limited assurance when they came to visit and do their audit. Limited assurance means that there are significant improvements to make that they found within this particular area. So they listed out their recommendations. Management, in terms of housing, considered those recommendations, and actually a lot had already moved, and I think the report's highlighting the various actions that had already been taken. Audit had come in at a point in time where actually the service had already recognised there were issues and had already addressed a number of those. But those recommendations sit. They've all been agreed by management in terms of what needs to take place, and there will be a follow-up. So this is coming to the Housing Review Board in terms of your preview, in terms of housing, your role as housing. But in addition, the Audit and Governance Committee get all reports that have limited assurance. So they look at the recommendations, look at a summary of the report, and SWAP do follow-up reports to the Audit and Governance Committee on any limited assurance to make sure those recommendations are put in place. So you've got that governance arrangement in place for any limited assurance reports. But it is felt that this committee needs to be aware of this particular report as it covers your area as well, and the recommendations are being worked through and an update is in the report. Happy to hand over to Catherine if she wants to add to that.
Yeah, nothing hugely more to add other than to say that this is a snapshot in time from quite a while ago, and that quite a lot of the work is already underway and has been completed. So again, it's a bit of a snapshot in time, really.
Excellent, thank you. Outside of committee, questions? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we're not dead sure what the actions were, but presume they are being done. The one thing they do mention here is about the KPI reports. We could not confirm any reported figures because the service does not keep evidence to support KPI reports. Housing is now reviewing this. Is this one of the actions or the action out of 9 that has been done? So we are now confident that the information this time that we have in our KPIs is correct.
Yep, absolutely. Sorry, through you, Chair. Absolutely. And it is also part of the information that we provide to the regulator of social housing as well on a regular basis. So it is absolutely up to date.
Brilliant, thank you. Any more questions from outside of committee? Councillor Kazar, please.
Thank you, Chair. A question to Katrina, or is it Katrine? Sorry if I got it wrong. Could you just give me an example then of what the electrical faults were, please?
Through you, Chair. I'm being reminded to say through you, Chair. For example, a lot of it was around data and how in which data was being stored in the system, for example, being held on separate spreadsheets and not actually being combined in a kind of central space. So some of that work has been happening and is underway. That's just one example. You know, a lot of it was an administration issue, mainly in the main.
Thank you very much. Outside committee anymore? No? Excellent. So we'll move into committee. Any question from members? Councillor Martin.
Yeah, the 9 actions that are referred to, can you tell me where they are? Because I went back to the Audit and Governance Committee report and I couldn't find them. Thanks.
Giles? Councillor Burhoff.
Whilst that's being pondered, I can echo that point actually, that in the Audit and Governance Committee we actually only just see the summary report. Given that there are 9 actions here, given that it was the Audit and Governance Committee's recommendation to bring this to this committee, can I suggest that the 9 actions are circulated, and also that on the forward plan in July, so the July meeting, a progress update on progress towards those 9 actions are included in that committee's business?
Through you, Chair. That's been noted. I'll take it away. In terms of, I'm unclear and I will need to double check how widely we are able to circulate, etc. And I'll just work all that out. We are in a position where we're needing to report back anyway to SWAP as a result of the audit actions anyway. So absolutely, we'll be able to give a full update.
Thank you. Any more questions from inside committee? No? It's got a recommendation. Yes. Over to you, Giles.
Right, so the recommendation is 1, note the actions outlined in the audit report, and secondly, asset management team to report to HRB at next meeting with full progress report on the action plan for assurance on completing all agreed actions.
Is everybody in support of that recommendation? Raise your hands. Unanimous. Thank you very much. So moving on then to agenda item 11, Housing Performance Report Quarter 3, 24-25, pages 33 to 44. Over to Andy King, please.
Oh, that is working. Hey, he knows who I am. Sorry about that, everyone. Technology is always fun. So as per standing item, you've got the Q3 performance report in your packs. This has been an evolving report over the last few quarters, taking feedback from the board around what we want included there, what we want it to look like. So again, feedback, welcome, either as part of this discussion or after the meeting if you've got any other ideas. One of the things that we're really keen to do is to start bringing in that element of kind of colour and what those KPIs look like actually in reality about performance, what that means for our tenants and for our housing stock in the district. So with that in mind, today's presentation is slightly different. Again, I think previously we were sort of going through what you've already got in the report in front of you. What I'm aiming to do with this presentation is bring to life what's in the written report in front of you. So yeah, say feedback welcome, but be kind. Thank you. So in terms of the performance headlines, these are sort of a summary of the key areas that you're seeing within your reports in front of you and the KPIs. You can see we've got real continued excellent performance in our income collection. Rent arrears as a percentage of annual rent debit is currently at 1.44% year to date, which is an incredible achievement by our rentals team. We've also seen a huge reduction in our income lost through void properties. That was at 4.53% at the beginning of the year, and that's down to 2.58% at the end of Q3. We've also seen vast improvements in the percentage of our self-contained dwellings that are vacant at the end of Q3. That was down to 1.75%. At the end of the last financial year, that was at 2.68%. So huge difference there as well. And our average days to re-let our homes, again, vastly reduced. At the end of Q3 was at 91.6 days. That was at 207.44 days at the end of the last financial year. And you'll see in your report as well that in November we achieved a median of 56 days, which is our lowest, certainly within the financial year. And I think if I went back probably over the last few years. We've seen a consistent achievement of over 95% of our repairs being completed within target by Ian Williams. I've explained in the report, I'm not happy, I say we, me and the team, are not happy with the data that our system's currently pushing out around completions. And this is to do with how our contractor systems speak to our housing system. So when they complete a job, in my layman's terms, they push a button that says they've completed it, and that tells our system they've completed it. It doesn't always work for various reasons. It can be because there's been a variation on the jobs order. It can be because the job became something different to what it originally was, and our system won't accept that. So there's various reasons. Just to give you some assurances, the team, Les has agreed that the project for the financial year end will be a targeted project to make sure that the WIP in the works in progress in our system are matching up with Ian Williams, and that we're on a agreed level. But as it stands, Ian Williams' data is actually more reliable, I feel, than ours at this moment in time, which is why I've used that data this month. Compliance performance also remains high, and I think there should be particular calls to acknowledge the progress made in electrical compliance. We now have 99.9% of our domestic properties now having a valid EICR. Of course, our target is 100%, but vast improvement from the last quarter's report. I think it's really important to say, probably following on from what Katrin said earlier, there's a real story being told here that's highlighting the incredible hard work of the housing services management teams and frontline officers. Significant improvements being made across the board, and I have to say actually that scale and pace of improvement I've not witnessed in my housing career, and I think I have a real sense of pride for what the team are achieving and the hard work that's going on, and I couldn't personally be more grateful actually for the dedication they've shown to doing that. And I think KPIs can feel a bit dry, but they are showing a genuine picture, and I think we're far enough into the year now to be able to see that that is a trend that's continuing. rather than a one-off anomaly, which is brilliant. I've also included within your report some some good news stories, I think I've called them, from around the services. And I wanted to highlight, since we were talking about the excellent performance of income collection, some rental examples. So, for example, our rental officers have given a case study to me where they worked with a tenant who was struggling significantly with finances. They were also in rent arrears, and through that work with that tenant, they've managed to get £28,000 of debts that they owe to various companies poured into a manageable debt relief order for them, and get them into a position where they could then afford to start paying towards their rent arrears and avoiding formal court action against their tenancy. And our rentals team have also told me that this year we've obtained over £14,000 of financial grants for our tenants, and through referrals to our financial resilience team, over £48,000 of financial gains have been achieved for tenants so far this year. So some really good news stories coming out of the team there. In terms of our complaints progress, we are only too aware that our performance in relation to complaint responses still leaves much room for improvement. That's not to say, though, that the teams on the ground are not working extremely hard to investigate those complaints. We have brought in brought over additional resources where it's needed, and we are making progress, but we're not there quite yet. But what I would say is I think a real picture's emerging of what we need to do to get there. Our response times for stage 1 complaints, with that said, have been steadily decreasing, and they ended on an average of 13 days at the end of Q3. Not quite within our 10 days, but again, I think a pleasing reduction from where we were at. Response times, unfortunately, for stage 2 complaints, though, have travelled in an adverse direction. Part of the issue for that is that stage 2 complaints bottleneck for sign-off, and I take responsibility for that. They have to come up to the AD in the current processes, but discussions have been had about how we spread that load out and improve that process and our response times, and I am positive that by the next report we'll see hopefully a change in that trajectory of our response time for stage 2. I think also you'll see from your report that there's a real reduction in the number of stage 1 complaints that we're upholding in housing. And I think that is testament to an improvement in performance, service delivery, complaint investigation and record keeping by the teams, that we're able actually to fully understand complaints that are coming in and, where necessary, push back on those and be able to evidence the work that we've done in those cases. Wanted to bring some visuals to you today as well. So our planned works team, we've talked a lot about kitchens today, so there's a couple of examples on here of some new kitchens that have gone into some of our properties this year. So these photos are showing you some recent kitchen completions in major refurbishment projects. So aside from the kitchen programme, where we've done major refurbishment of individual properties, we also are doing component upgrades in those cases as well. And one of those photos is a recently completed project of a whole house refurbishment, with the kitchen obviously being part of that. And the picture of the bathroom there is showing you a recent bathroom adaptation to a wet room. You'll see in your report so far this year, we've had 370 requests for adaptations in our properties, and that has included 53 major bathroom adaptations and 6 kitchen adaptations, separate to kitchen replacements, but adaptations. We are also, or we have started, a programme to improve and upgrade our sewage treatment plants. We own circa 11 sewage treatment plants within the HRA across the district that service our properties and also properties of surrounding leaseholders. We've begun that programme this year. That will continue into next year. You'll see in a photo here of a real sewage treatment plant of ours. It's not a Google search, the before and after of the works done there, led by our team. This will see significant investment of over £1 million across the 2-year period, but it's, I think we can all agree, critical infrastructure that's needed for those properties. And I'm really pleased that that's work that's underway now. It's really complex work. It requires individual design and consultation, legal work and communication with leaseholders and landowners, and often it needs us to agree heads of terms, lease variations and way leaves. So not a simple task, but one that the team are moving forward with at pace. This is an example of a void property. So we talk about our void numbers a lot, but we never actually look. This is a property that was handed back to us with the garden in that condition, and I couldn't resist putting the internal picture up to show you the scale of that. And the reason I'm showing this to you is as an example of why some of these voids take so much longer and are costing so much more, because of the condition that they're handed back in. Now, to preempt some questions or thoughts, one might ask, well, why was that not dealt with whilst the tenant was in situ? Sometimes it is, and we get positive results. Sometimes it is, to be honest, a property that we might not have seen for a couple of years, and we all know how quickly our gardens grow up. Equally, it could be a tenant that we have taken action against that has resulted potentially in termination of tenancy, but that doesn't mean we then don't need to address the issue that they did not address despite our best efforts. You will see the fantastic after photos from, so this is Ian Williams having gone in and done the void works and really got that garden ready for the new tenant, patio installed, garden levelled for them to plant up as they wish. And the next slide shows the front of the same property and the condition that that was left in for us to oversee. And I actually gasped when I saw these photos in the difference by the time we were done. So that's the kind of work that's going on in the ground. And when we talk about our void numbers, times and budgets, this is some of the outcomes that are happening. This is also an example of a void property that's handed back to us in this condition. Tenants did not take their belongings. I did have some after photos, but they weren't really that impressive because it was just showing you cream walls, so I didn't put those up. But just to give you a good idea of what some of the cases that we're coming up against in that team. This is another example of a property. The kitchen, to be honest, was pretty solid, but I think we can all agree it probably met the end of its life in terms of aesthetics at least. And so the after works of those void works, showing you a property. That was one of our shelter bungalows actually. Kitchen that I'd be very happy to move into and have. And just kind of to tie that up around our voids, again, this is an example I put in the report, but one of the case studies that was sent to me was around a couple who were living in private rented accommodation. They were served a Section 21 eviction by their landlord and were unable to find alternative private accommodation. There were disabilities within the household as well, but was made the case slightly more complex and made the process or the thought of going into temporary accommodation for that household even more unsavoury than it might be for the regular person. We were able to work with our voids team to reprioritise a void, shelter bungalow, and get that property ready in time for that tenant to move in and avoid them going into temporary accommodation. So again, when we talk about the number of voids that we're bringing back into service, these are the end users who are benefiting from that. We've also do a lot of community work, and this does not come through in our KPIs. But our communities team run 8 hubs across the district. During the last year, we've had 6,285 visits to those hubs, and that included 192 visits across the hubs in the week leading up to Christmas. In that time, and amongst those visits, we have served 5,871 hot meals, which vary from homemade soup to a full Chinese buffet for Lunar New Year. We've also given out over 600 blankets, along with hats, thick socks and gloves. And I had a testimony sent through from one of the tenants who attend those hubs. He said, personally, I found the Warm Hub to be a lifeline and an absolute godsend. I used to have a very good job. I got paid well and had a very full life. After 18 years of ill health, I am no longer able to work full time. For most of COVID, I was stuck in at home on my own, shielding due to being immunosuppressed, and I sadly lost my part-time job working from home. I'm very sociable, but became very lonely, depressed, and isolated. The weekly warm hubs have really helped me feel positive, happy again, and I've made some very good friends. And then lastly, the last bit of KPI, I suppose, from your report is our quarterly tenant satisfaction journey. So as it previously explained, we are now doing quarterly surveys that will then accumulate at year end to give us our final output. That started in Q2. These are Q3's results compared against Q2. And the difference from the end of last year's survey that we would have submitted as our final tenant satisfaction data. Again, I think there's ups and downs. We knew that in winter we were likely to get slightly lower results than maybe we got in the summer-autumn period. And there's lots of data behind that around survey and satisfaction measures in the colder, greyer months and general feeling towards things. Also, we know people are having more repairs done in their homes, etc. So there's lots of factors that feed into that. When you look at the Q3 versus Q2 results, there is a mixture. Some have gone down, some have gone up. For example, we've had a significant increase in satisfaction in the time taken to complete repairs, up from 48% to 63%. I actually thought that might go the other way in those winter surveys. So as a pleasing surprise, and actually not far off what was the benchmark across the sector last year at 70%. So there's some really pleasing figures coming out about tenant satisfaction. And as we get the Q4 results in after the end of March, we will then get an overall picture of where we've landed for the entire financial year. But so far, looks like a positive picture being painted. That's my ramblings finished for you. I'm going to unplug my laptop so we can see people's cameras and invite any questions.
Thank you very much. Brilliant. Like to see pictures. I'm sure everyone else does as well, because it really does show the difference, actually, doesn't it? With what we actually achieve, which is fantastic from looking at those. So yeah, well done. Thank you. So outside of committee, questions. Councillor Gazzard, please. We'll just give Andy a couple minutes to move himself.
Okay.
Well, you stay there.
I'll stay here.
You stay. No. Okay. Indeed, you stay here.
Thank you, Chair. Can I say thank you very much for, first of all, for an excellent report and the way that it's been laid out. I really do appreciate what. I'll just start off with. I think it's 210 when you gave the good news stories, if you like. It's really refreshing to see and hear that our officers do everything they can to assist tenants that find themselves in financial problem, and I really do appreciate that. And I also appreciate, because I'm one of those that keep banging on about voids actually, is to see the case studies, if you like, that you've shown us. So it does show that, with goodwill and everything else, we can get properties back into circulation. So thank you for that. My question at the end is to do with the satisfaction survey. Are these figures that we've undertaken, or satisfaction reports from clients, or tenants rather, should I say, and not from Ian Williams, please?
Yeah, so the tenant satisfaction measure, that is an entirely independent process, and we actually use an external company, and they ask them about repairs, they ask them about their home, their communal areas, all sorts of questions. But no, it's not done by Ian Williams. We use an external company who is also used by Exeter and one of the other local districts. So we came together to appoint that and ensure value for money in all three of us sharing the same provider.
Yes, you can come back. Yep.
Thank you for that. The reason why I ask that is because as a tenant, I regularly get a phone call from a company asking me whether I'm a council tenant and have I got any problems with repairs. And I constantly tell them that I'm an East Devon District Councillor and I deal with East Devon District Council. So I'm assuming that this company who is contacting me is a scam to try and get. It sounds like a legal issue they're asking. You know, are you happy with your authority? But there is this, and it only happened again last week to me. So I don't know whether you're aware of that other tenants might be getting the same sort of phone calls. Thank you.
Yes, so Councillor Kessel, they are claims farmers. So what they do is they go around collecting names. They'll send somebody around to do a disrepair report, and then those will be sold to the various companies, usually based in the northwest of England, and they will then look at them and potential of return for legal costs against damages that they can reclaim for their clients. So they are claims farmers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Barlow, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I also like to say, well done. It appears to be improving. I'm a little worried about the satisfaction survey saying that you've got 63% of repairs being done on time, when at the same time we've got a report from Ian Williams saying 99% are done on time. I don't understand how can anyone moan if everything's being done on time, and yet you've got 63% saying that they're being done on time. That's the first thing. The other thing is the actual figures you're giving us. They seem to vary. So if you look at November's report, and I'm a sad enough person that did, the figures are totally different that you're giving us now. It's totally different. They are different. So that even the final figures that you've got for, let me just take one for example, for income loss through void properties, no, that's not a very good one, sorry, 2 seconds. Income collection. So in November, you gave the final outturn for 23-24 as 1.6%, but in this one it's 1.78, and then the quarter one was 1.4, it's 1.57, quarter two was 1.35, 1.1. I don't know which one is right, and I don't care which one is right. My point is if you want to give us figures, they should be consistent all the way through. Otherwise, it just makes me feel, do we really know what the position is? So I would just point that out as something that I think you should be aware of. And all of them, all of the figures, income generation, properties vacant, they're all slightly different. Not huge amounts, but it's enough to make it different. The warm hubs, they're excellent. I go to them quite often down in Sidmouth, and I would just like to say that the people that run it and the care they give, I went to the Christmas lunch there, had several drinks, had to get a taxi home. So I would just like to say it really was impressive, and the care we give is impressive. The people we have on the ground are really, really caring. I just worry about things like Ian Williams doing his own returns. You know, I've never known of anyone where you rely on, and I know you're going to say we're not happy with our figures. Well, you know, to me that's an unacceptable thing, that you are not happy with your figures and you therefore are relying on the people we're paying to do the job to almost they're looking at their own figures and saying we're brilliant, we've done 99%. No one does 99% ever. And anyone that ever tells you to do 99% of something, you shouldn't believe them, because it's almost impossible. So going from 80 to 99%, that's a red flag to me. But anyway, thank you very much, I think.
Thank you. So just to focus on, so the repairs done on time in the tenant satisfaction measure, that is asking tenants, are they happy with how quickly repairs were done, not whether or not we completed them within our KPIs. Now, to give you an example, I had a complaint from a tenant the other day who reported a leak in their property on a Saturday evening and were unhappy that we didn't attend until early morning of Sunday. And that was with a boiler failure. We met our KPI, we attended within 24 hours, the tenant wasn't happy. And so that's why you'll see a disparity, regardless of whether or not we agree with Ian Williams' figures. You'll always see a disparity between whether tenants were happy and whether or not we met our internal KPIs. So that's that one. In terms of the figures changing, you're very astute. I noticed the same thing and have asked the questions of our data team. The figures are based on information at the time. It's a snapshot in time. And as we close down various accounts, we deal with, for example, our system, as our figures change, our property numbers. So as we sell properties, then percentages change, or as we purchase properties, percentages change, because it's all done as a percentage of. So figures do move, and it is just a snapshot in time at that moment. So the figures that we're showing for Q3 may well alter as we go through to Q4 and various things are closed down. In terms of the data, I do completely understand what you're saying. What I suppose I would say is that data in our system that I'm not happy with is led by our contractors. So we don't know when a job's been completed unless I have a surveyor out following every operative round with Ian Williams or Liberty Gas. I never know when those jobs are completed. We rely on the contractor to tell us that they've done that job and close it down on the system. And that's the issue that we've got, that they're closing it down on their system as complete, but it's not telling our system. And that's why I say our data's unreliable. Whether or not there's question marks over the figures, there may well be, but I think until we get that WIP fully aligned and that project that as I say, Les and the team have taken on, it's very difficult for us to do that scrutiny on the kind of anomalies and outliers because there's such a difference in our data because of the system issues. But absolutely, it is normal for a contractor to be telling us that they've completed those works. And so as we've talked about before in the complaints, we talk about time taken, outstanding repairs, etc. When you look at the number of complaints we get regarding repairs in relation to the number of repairs we do, we're talking 1.something% of repairs that we complete resulting in a formal complaint. That doesn't mean, see, there's people who aren't dissatisfied and have not made a formal complaint, but I think that sets kind of a picture and does align with the sort of satisfaction levels that we're seeing. But of course, as members and as a senior member of staff, I only ever get the worst case stories, but we forget that there's 14,000 other jobs being completed that I've never even had to hear about because it was reported, booked in, attended, completed. So we're always seeing the worst case scenarios come through because that is the nature of that. Hope that answers.
Thank you very much. That's the outside committee. Then we will move. Oh, yes, Westerman.
Yes, I carrying on from what Ian's just said. Who is there a quality control going on to check that work that has been signed off by Ian Williams is up to standard?
Certainly not every job. No, that would yes. Major work. So there's kind of a tier. So major works, every major work project is overseen by one of our planned work surveyors generally, and they will monitor that throughout the process and they will sign off the works at the end and snag the works and any defects highlighted will be addressed by the contractor. Similarly with our voids, they are signed off by our voids manager along with Ian Williams, his void surveyor at the end of that process. I'd be lying if I said that process has worked smoothly, but we've put some measures in place very recently actually that are going to improve that process and hopefully ensure that we're not picking up repairs too quickly after someone moves into a property. Of course, there are always things that you can't foresee. In terms of other works, we do spot check surveys of our tenants. Were they happy with the repairs? And our repairs team carry that out. So of a number of jobs completed each week, they call a number of the tenants who've had those jobs completed and check that they're happy with the quality of the work that was done. So we're getting that data feedback from our tenants as well.
Okay, and are they mainly happy with the work? And the other thing I'd like to ask is how many jobs have to be repeated within a few months or so?
I afraid I don't have the latest update on the figures from the internal calls. I don't know, Les, if you've got it to hand. Oh, he does, bless him. We might have that figure for you in a moment. In terms of how many jobs were repeated, that's potentially some information we get, certainly on recalls, so we can tell you which jobs we've recalled, which means we weren't happy or the tenant wasn't happy with the job, so we tell the contractor, you need to go back and we're not paying you to go again because you should have done it right the first time. So we can certainly get those sorts of figures.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So moving into committee, Councillor Brown.
Right, just wanted a bit of clarification on Ian Williams. They've done thousands and thousands of jobs. Say somebody had a handle needed replacing and the door didn't fit properly in the hole. Would that count as one job, even though they actually went, they replaced the handle and didn't do the door? So do they get a call-out charge each time they go to a premises? Because surely that should have been done as one job, not part done, the easy part, replacing a handle. So, no, if they're doing things like that, then they are actually increasing their 16,000 jobs done, and it's all bitty, picking the easy ones.
So we raise for jobs to Ian Williams, they don't raise their own jobs. So if a tenant tells us, using the door example, my door isn't fitting and the handle's broken, we would send a job through that says overhaul and adjustment of the entire door, replacement of handle, and that would go through as probably as one job, although it may have a couple of codes on it behind the system, so there'd be a cost for a new handle and there'd be a cost for a replacement door, for example. If we'd sent that job through and Ian Williams went out and only did the handle, that would then become a recall because they've not completed the job that we asked them to do. So that would not count then as an extra job, or if it was a chargeable job, and not all jobs are chargeable because we have our price per property, but that's another matter. So that would not be another chargeable visit because they hadn't done what they were instructed to do, unless of course they get out on site and then find that there are certain materials needed, for example. Maybe we put through, because the tenant told us, you get this a lot with doors, for example, it's a PVC front door, engineer gets out there and it's actually a composite front door and that needs different parts in order to make the repair. So it does depend on the quality of data we're getting through as well, and what goes across on the jobs order. So there's many factors that go into it, but as a principle, no, that wouldn't count as additional.
Thank you very much. Next, Councillor Smith, Vice Chair, please.
I just wondered if you had any stories you could share with the use of the app now in play. Seems to be more widely rolled out. Is that helping internally? And is there any impact you can share with us?
As in the East Devon app, is that? Yeah. So the East Devon app, tenants do have access to report repairs through the app because they can ultimately do anything on there that they could have done on our website, and the form for reporting repairs is on there. We don't know when that repair is reported, whether or not that's come through the website or through the app. So whether or not there's data in the background that tells people that, but we just see that it was a firm step form completed for a repair. I think what we will know moving forward when we get our tenant portal is how effective that is for our tenants, being able to log in, self-serve, view their account details, etc. And that's all things that we'll be updating on at future meetings. But yes.
Thank you very much, Andy. Just go over to Les, just come back with some information. Thank you.
Very briefly, online cases at the time that we've had for last year was 5,650. So that does show that we are using that portal more.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Dumper, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First thing, I've got one or two comments to make, but first thing is I've noticed as we've been going through the report, and I'm sorry I didn't report this at the beginning, I may have another interest to declare. It comes under item 10.5, and it mentions the firm which has carried out the satisfaction surveys called Acuity. Now, I happen to be the director of a non-remunerated director of a firm that actually works closely with Acuity and shares some of the same work, but I'm unaware of whether the firm I'm talking about actually did any of the East Devon work. But I think I should declare that because I obviously know about it, which I didn't before. So,
Thank you for raising that, Councillor Dunbar.
can I just say again, following on from Councillor Steve Gazzard, thank you very much for this report, brilliant. And I'd like to to say, as a new member of this committee, some of the activities that go through the community hubs and that kind of thing, we have as town councillors been quite involved or on an edge bit with, and town councils, I think, generally have got involved with that. So thank you very much for the work you do.
Thank you. I was just going to say thank you, and I'll ensure that's passed on to the teams who do all of that fantastic work, so thank you.
Councillor Barhop, please.
Thank you. Sorry, Melanie. At the risk of sounding boring, I'd like to also congratulate the team on tremendous continuous improvement demonstrated from these KPIs in virtually every area. So well done. Notably, we're missing any data on Liberty Gas, so they just seem to be behind the 8 ball here. And I'm sure lots of efforts by your team to try and bring them in line. I should urge them to get their ducks in a row in terms of reporting. It's probably contained within their contract that they have to maintain reports on their performance. So I would suggest that we go to DEFCON 2 on that one. Just on warm hubs as well, I noted a communication that came out to all residents, I think, on warm hubs and the activities that were being planned for warm hubs for January and February that was recently circulated. I actually incorporated that in my magazine article for February for the local wards parish magazine to try and advertise it. Although we don't have a warm hub in our area, they're quite accessible. And also, I was going to make the point that they're accessible to all residents of East Devon, not just tenant residents. So, all are welcome, including officers. So, if you're feeling chilly here, particularly in this chamber, there are warm hubs available. Please make use of them to all. Finally, in terms of the statistics, there's a great old adage which says, and you'll all know it, but there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Everything's pointing in the right direction. And I'll just turn to the tenant representatives who are here today and say, well, how does it feel on the ground? Is it feeling genuinely better? Or is it, you're not sensing that, really? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barhop. Would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. I think overall it's improving, but one of the main things I hear from my association when we have our meetings is the lack of communication, and I don't think that's improved at all.
I think my situation was quite, I sort of stumbled accidentally into a housing situation from going from private rental due to ill health, but I think my journey has been quite amazing. I think the people who've been involved with my journey, from someone who I went from greatness to losing everything, and actually I think the support network around me was it just grew overnight, and there was a number of people. It was just good. I think the service was great, and it's been ongoing, and it's still ongoing. I think it's been amazing for myself.
Thank you very much, everybody. Andy, of course you can.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you both for sharing. Thank you for the question, actually. Lack of communication, I think, is fair, and I think it's something that we've recognised. There's a couple of specific cases that have come up of late, and I think you're always in danger when you're moving at pace of forgetting to tell people what you're doing, or you're pedaling away in the background, but you forget that actually they don't know that you're doing that. And for that person, for the end user, it can feel like nothing's moving on. So no, completely take that on board and appreciate that. And just to clarify as well, in fairness to Liberty Gas, it's probably my fault, Chris, because, and I'm going to blame the Christmas break and shutdown, but by the time we sort of came to reports due and the time that had lapsed, I had Ian Williams data to hand, but not Liberty, which is why I've noted in there. I didn't think it was fair to Liberty for me to put our systems data in when I am almost certain that that data is incorrect and unfair. And they didn't have the opportunity to rebut that. So that's why it's missing this quarter, but it will definitely be there in quarter 4.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's really great to sit here and hear your stories, and it was a great question. Well done. I'd also like to say, you know, this upward trend, it's really, it's good, it's positive. When I first started, we had different styles of report, but there was red all over them. And it's great to see those changing to amber and green. So well done to the team for moving things along in a positive direction. It is a big difference, however, particularly when you look at the problems we had, you know, with some of our housing repairs and the contractor there. That had a lot of red on it. And when I opened this report, I was hit in the face with the amount of green on this report. And you do talk about the fact that you can't trust your own reporting systems, your own data. You said that today. But the question I wanted to ask is, how much can you trust the data and the reporting systems that Ian Williams is putting forward? How does that work? Is it reliable? Is it audited? Thank you.
So I think probably go back to what I said earlier, but actually if our systems were talking to each other correctly, our system would be saying the same, which is why and I'm not saying we can't challenge that, but we're not in a position to challenge it at the moment because our systems are so far apart. But the reason for that data disparity is because of a system talking issue. If that was working correctly, every job that Ian Williams completed would complete in our system. Give or take some processes that might happen in the background. But that would be the ultimate outcome, and therefore our system would be saying the exact same thing as theirs. So this is more about a data sharing issue between the two systems and ensuring that that's aligned. Once we know that they're aligned and we are on the same level playing field, of course, we may then have conversations with our contract managers at Ewins and be like, this is a very good figure, feels almost too good to be true, let's scrutinise that, and we might take sample data then out of that to scrutinise. We might telephone that tenant and say, we're told your job was completed on this date, is that correct? And do some of those checks. But until that is working properly, it's really difficult to do those checks and balances. But yes, if that talking piece between the systems is working at the moment, they would be outputting the same results.
May I come back? Thank you. But even when it sounds to me when your two systems do start talking to each other, you're still not going to know fully whether the job has actually been completed. Like you said, unless you send a surveyor around, but you do spot checks. I think that's something to maybe put a bit more work into, as Catherine would say. Try and find a method of making sure that when the jobs are done, they really are done. Even if it's perhaps just a phone call to see if it's done. You know, if the tenant can report that it is completed. I'm not saying that, you know, we've talked about this before. I know previously I've brought it up, that it would be too much to have a surveyor go around. But a phone call, do you think is that job done okay? Yes, it is. That's great. You know, otherwise it's down to us councillors to be out there talking to our council tenants and, you know, hopefully hearing more of these stories on the ground. Thank you.
So I think to do it, sorry, through you, Chair.
Catherine just wants to jump in quickly.
Go on then.
We're fighting over answering your question, Melanie. Yeah, I mean, just to sort of state really, the percentage, as Andy said, percentage of jobs, completed jobs, is followed up, you know, and a phone call from our repairs team to just have exactly that conversation, to do that kind of quality check, as well as the kind of customer service check. Are you happy with the work that was being provided in the service and the way it was delivered? And then furthermore, I mean, whilst it is a question about, you know, again, there's a transparency here in terms of us saying that the data isn't quite marrying up at the minute between the two systems, but actually when you look at this, the sheer amount of information that Ian Williams are providing, and the fact that we're not getting continuous calls from tenants going, this work hasn't been done, for example, then, you know, there are certain measures in place that allow us to be able to be fairly certain on the validity of that data. And furthermore, the teams are meeting on a monthly basis, and scrutiny is happening on a weekly basis around that WIP. So from both sides of the business. So from Ian Williams' perspective, they are scrutinising that WIP on a weekly basis. They're then referring that over, and then we're doing that piece of work as well. So whilst there may be this kind of overarching caveat, we are confident that the work is being completed, and that is part of the work of a number of people within Les's team to do those checks and balances, as I say, on a weekly basis. And that is then all married up against invoices and checked, and invoice numbers are checked against this invoice number is checked against this before any monies are released, for example. So there is a really robust system that sits behind it, just to give some assurance. And, you know, in places I've worked with previously, and in a number of different places, you know, your contractors would automatically just come in and be able to type directly into your portal, into your system. So that is something that we need to look at. Why wasn't that originally part of that contract with Ian Williams? What can we do in order to develop and change some of those ways of working so that we don't have two systems running? Because obviously, as you imagine, as I've just described, the amount of work and labour that takes, and this comes back into that efficiency piece again that I mentioned right back at the beginning. You know, it's about looking at ways of working more smartly and a little bit leaner. So part of that is again part of that ongoing conversation that we need to look at in order to develop the service and make sure that it's kind of as seamless as we possibly can make it.
Andy, did you want to come back from that?
No, she stole the words right out of my mouth.
Very good. Right, I have on my list to, yep, okay. Rob, next, because you haven't spoken yet. Yep.
I just want to say as well as this journey that I came on to become part of the social housing was the other network of support as well, not just through the council, so organisations that also were a part and working alongside the council. So like, I know in Axminster there's a number of things like Pippins, the Waffle House, who all played a part in that as well. So they need some credit to assist people who really are struggling down their luck. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Brown, is it quick? Excellent.
The Axe Valley CAP are very good at helping with people with that, with the finances. But for months, I've been talking about a thing called the One Housing Information Management System. How is that actually going on? Because that was supposed to be the all singing, all dancing thing that was going to sort Ian Williams out so we could actually see what's going on.
Catherine. Oh, Andy. Who would like this one?
Katrine.
Well, we can tag team if you like. So One Housing is our housing management system, and that was rolled out in September 23, I believe. One Housing is an off-the-shelf product designed by a company called Capita, and that is the system that the council chose to use or to bring in, and it was a replacement of the system before that, Open Housing. So it was the newer, older, or younger, I should say, more vibrant system. Now, there are elements of that system that still have to be built. So there's add-ons, there's different modules that you can add into it and all those sorts of things. So we're going through the process of understanding, obviously we've come into the council and been shown this is our housing system. from my experience, from Katrin's experience, and from others who've come into the organisation, we sort of said, well, we've used systems that can do X, Y, and Z. Can this one do it? But there's never a quick answer. It's not a sort of flick on button. It's then the team working with Capita, looking at the add-ons, and then you sort of have to have that made slightly more bespoke for you to do various things. What I would say is the system is doing the primary functions that a housing system needs to do. It is recording our repairs. It is raising those orders through to Ian Williams. It is paying our invoices through the system. So all of those sorts of modules are working. The things that we're looking at to expand that system are more enhancements in terms of our ongoing case management, our estate management, our tenancy management, those sorts of things. But the system is in existence and working. The final part that we sort of noted is the tenant portal, which will talk into One Housing, that it will be worked on. I don't know the time frame for that, so I'm not going to commit another team to that time frame. It would be unfair of me, but I know it's in train, and so we're all very keen to have, and that will then connect into One Housing as well.
Thank you very much. Excellent. So this agenda item 11, housing performance report, is just to be noted by the committee and everybody. So everybody will be pleased to know that that actually brings our meeting to a close today. I'd like to thank everybody for attending, and I think we've had some really positive stuff come forward today. So thank you very much, officers, members, everyone, for attending.
Thank you.